Question, the member from Toronto Danforth.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, my question to the Acting Premier. The cost of housing is reaching ridiculous heights in Toronto and in cities across Ontario. Last week, the Premier and her Liberal Party had a chance to help out renters facing unfair rent hikes by unscrupulous landlords, but she didn't take it. The Premier is meeting with GTHA Mayors today to talk about housing affordability. Will she be telling those mayors that she will actually be closing the 1991 rent control loophole?
Minister of Housing.
Minister of Housing.
Well, thank you, Speaker, and thank you to the member of the third party for that really important question. You know, I'll say again, Mr. Speaker, the Premier has said it many times, I've said it many times in this House, that it is absolutely unacceptable that so many Ontarians are faced with housing costs that are rising so dramatically. You know, and that's why we are in the process of developing that plan to address unfair rises in rental costs. You know, in the coming weeks, Speaker, we will be rolling out a very substantive rent control reform in Ontario. I've said it again. I'm happy to stand here and say it again today, Speaker. You know, our plan is going to include a broad package of change that will help protect tenants. Mr. Speaker, one of the reasons that I could not support the member's response to the member's bill that was tabled a couple of weeks ago was simply that it didn't do enough. We will do more.
Thank you. Supplementary.
So, Speaker, I take that as a no. I go on to my next question. While the Premier dithers on rent controls, 31 seniors in Sault Ste. Marie are facing a 31% increase in their rent. Wow. These seniors are living on a fixed income, and a 31% rent increase on top of their soaring hydro bills may mean that a number of them will lose their homes.
Terrible.
Will the Acting Premier promise these seniors that rent control, any rent control or housing reform that is brought in will be retroactive so that they can hold on to their homes?
Good question.
Minister.
Well, thank you again, Speaker, and it's always good to continue on with the dialogue. You know, just before I carry on, you know, Speaker, I just want to highlight just a few of the things that this government has done to take action. You know, we've worked on secondary suites with our municipal partners to make those easier. We've passed inclusionary zoning legislation. We have frozen municipal property tax on apartment buildings. We've doubled the maximum refund for first-time home buyers, and we're continuing to collect data. You know, Speaker, this week, the leader of the third party told media when she was being interviewed, she was asked whether her party's rent control legislation does it do enough to protect renters, and she said, Speaker, absolutely not. And I agree with her on that, Speaker. It doesn't go far enough. That answer just isn't good enough. You know, Speaker, it makes me wonder where this back-of-the-napkin proposal by the NDP will leave the 1 million Ontarians who already have rent control.
Final supplementary.
Well, dialogue is not a bad thing, but action is what's really needed here. Action. Ontarians aren't impressed by photo ops of the Premier with GTHA mayors. Renters need action, and they need it now. While the Premier sits on the sidelines, unscrupulous landlords in Toronto are taking advantage of this moment and, in some cases, doubling rents for people who can least afford it. Since the Premier refuses to close the 1991 rent loophole now, will she do it retroactively to protect people who are facing economic eviction because of unscrupulous landlords?
Thank you. Minister.
Well, thank you, Speaker. And I will say that I didn't think that the NDP would oppose the Premier meeting with our municipal leaders from across the GTHA, but it sounds to me as if they don't think that's a good idea, that we shouldn't be continuing the dialogue with our municipal partners, making sure, Speaker.
It may indeed be the chair.
Well, thank you, Speaker, and I'll carry on. You know, on this side of the House, we think it's really important to build those relationships with our municipal partners, with our federal partners. When it comes to the important issue of housing affordability, it's absolutely untenable. It's absolutely untenable that people face the issues they have with the rising rent. You know, we are going to have solutions that take